Welcome to Kinship Cafe. I am your host, Jim Jones, and today I am joined with Julia Othmer.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm really great.
I'm so glad you made it today. I know it was ended up being quite the challenge with the traffic jams.
The journey by car between Los Angeles and San Diego is often a very curious one.
Well,
very highly unpredictable.
Yes. Well, I am very glad you made the effort. I'm really going to enjoy our time together tonight.
I've already enjoyed our time together so far.
Oh, good. Well, today we're going to talk about community and music and how these things work together. Before we do that, would you like to start us off with a song?
Sure.
Awesome.
Whether you know it by name, whether it's vague and in vain, whether it's sadly the same, come on in. Whether the tide dragged you in, whether you stumbled again, whether you fear it's a dream, come on in. Oh, whether you're saying, whether you're numb, whether you do it for fun. Come, my dear, gather around the fire, and don't worry or wonder, is it what you deserve? Raise your cup and sing, hey, oh, or shout it down, way, oh, way, oh. We will need it at least one more round, hey, oh, or shout it down, way, oh, when you're done. Whether you wanted your fame, whether you shouldered their shame, whether you tempered the blame, come on in. Whether you thrilled on a lie, whether it was do or die, whether you cared or know why, come on in. Come, my dear, gather around the fire, and don't worry or wonder, is it what you deserve? Raise your cup and sing, hey, oh, or shout it down, way, we will need it at least one more round, hey, oh, or shout it down, way, and we're done. And we're done. And we're done. Now that you've come through the door and you've had the floor, do you find you want more? Since you came in.
Well, that was just fantastic, Julia.
Thank you.
There's so much energy in that. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
So what is this song called?
It's Weather.
And is this an original?
It is an original.
And what can you tell us about it?
I sometimes get a bit shy about speaking too much about what a song means to me, simply because my hope is that whoever is listening to the song or engaging with it feels like the song, especially if they connect with it, feels that the song is for them and about them and whatever meaning they might be putting into it or taking out of it. But in general, I would say that well, it is my version of a drinking song. But also I feel like it can be really difficult for people to live their truth. And I think it takes incredible courage, and I have great admiration for those who do. And that song very much was inspired by somebody who long thought the truth they wanted to live in their life wasn't accessible to them. And then when they did actually embrace that, there was kind of a lot of interesting things that came up, like, okay, well, if I'm now actually going to experience this, why didn't I experience it before? And in short, it's hopefully some kind of commentary and celebration of those who are going for it, whatever that might be, however that might be.
I like it. Really fun. So when we first connected, it was actually not music, which is kind of interesting because you're an amazing musician. But I plugged into a political conversation that you happened to be in on social media.
What?
I know.
Political conversations on social media? That's insane. Who would dare do such a thing?
But one of the things I was just really struck by and why I reached out to you was how you were really trying to bring in the reins on a conversation that had become very polarized and trying to find ways to come back to the middle to be able to have that conversation. And I just thought that that was such an important thing that we need today. And I'm glad that you were open to having conversations because I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on this.
Well, it's exactly that. If we're not able to have conversations, we're just going to either be in an echo chamber or we're going to be screaming at the wall. But the wall might actually be another person who's also screaming back at you, and nobody actually is gaining any kind of new insights or information or understanding. And I found that the conversations that most stimulate me are the ones where I'm learning something, where I can understand a new point of view or a new perspective, as radically different as it might be from one that I hold or previously held. Maybe the conversation encourages me to have a broader idea of a concept. In general, what troubles me is when we are yelling at each other, especially on these sort of the anonymous side of social media platforms.
Yeah.
And I feel really grateful to do music because through music, I think I have a much more diverse community online than I would have if I didn't do music. Because I've found within those who have been supporting the music and coming out to shows and have engaged with me because of the music that I make, there's been quite an interesting diversity, of all kinds of demographics, socioeconomic, age, religious, gender fluidity, political. So my conversation gets a bit spicier and has a lot more components to it if people are engaging with me and I'm engaging back. The thing that I find troubling is as we lose this ability to have a constructive dialogue, we lose the ability to have compassion for the other and to recognize ourselves in other people. And I always used to think like America as a larger concept was no matter what kind of ideology a person had, it felt like in general there was a decency. There was sort of a practical decency and a sort of respect that people had for one another. It might be surface only, it might be only sort of skin deep, but it existed. And this sort of radical thrashing of one another hurts my heart.
Yeah.
It really hurts my heart because we're starting to see in one another strangers instead of, people that we just haven't come to know yet.
Yeah.
I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, I have definitely picked up on this shift where I think there's just so much more fear that's involved where people are drawing these lines in the sand, digging in their heels because the foundations that they depend on feel like maybe they're changing or shifting. And I think there's maybe a larger social kind of change that's going on along with, the politics and everything else that's kind of polarized. And unfortunately, when people are operating from that position of fear or defensiveness, I mean, literally the brain chemistry changes to the point where you're not hearing or reasoning the same way. So we've got to find some ways to come back together to have the conversation.
I totally agree, and I think you mentioned fear and social change, and we're having really rapid social change in probably a rapidity that hasn't yet occurred in the modern era.
Yeah.
Somebody's probably fact checking that right now and saying, no, well, you're wrong in 1865. But along with that fear, and I think there's been a danger in sort of this idea of political correctness, because when we often fear what we don't know, and when we make the conversation so difficult to have where someone doesn't even feel like they can ask a question about something that's so different, because in the asking of the question, that might be offensive.
Right.
It gets scarier and scarier to take a step into that unknown, which is already scary because it's unknown.
Yeah.
And if we could just all have a little bit more kindness towards one another, a little bit more allowance for a mistake, for a misspeak, for a misunderstanding. Like if I said X and I really meant to say Y, would you give me the opportunity to wait? Sorry, I meant to say X. Can we just reverse the conversation back a little bit and move forward with a sense of, I'd really like to know what you have to say, and I'd really like to hear what, I'd like to have that dialogue.
Yeah.
If we could just create a little bit more margin of error.
Some generosity.
Generosity of spirit.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends also why you sit down at the table with somebody. Is it to tell me how right you are and how wrong I am? Is it so we can agree on points that we're already sure we agree on? What is the point? Yeah. I remember once I posted a political, well, it wasn't something I thought that was actually so political, which was interesting. And there were a few people that kind of came at me rather ferociously, and it seemed like a complete non sequitur to what I'd even posted. And so I actually went on Facebook and I started going to these people's pages, and I did realize that some of these were bots and trolls, and they weren't real. They weren't real accounts, but some of them were real. And I just reached out and said, "Hey, you made this comment on a post that I had put up, and I'm really kind of curious what's behind this, because this is what I perceived. Is this what you meant?" And of these, a few people actually wrote back to me, and it was really interesting, some of the comments. One guy just said, actually, now that you mention, I'm a little embarrassed, but I'm normally a really decent person. I'm just so angry, and this was a great way for me to, express things in a way that I secretly have wanted to for a while because of my level of frustration. And we actually had this really interesting conversation. And if I had just taken this person at their word in the forum of social media, I would have had a very incorrect idea about this person.
Yeah.
And now that we had a bit more, we kind of showed each other our faces, not literally, but sort of had a more one-on-one connection, the whole atmosphere changed. And it's I wonder what that dynamic is. What do we need that we're not getting, that we would need to go onto a platform with a bit more anonymity and scream and freak out, or whatever that might be?
Yeah, that is interesting. I think that there's because of all that fear and frustration, just not knowing what to do with it, and it just happens to be there maybe. But it's curious too, going back to your earlier comment, talking about political correctness. This is something I wrestle with too, because there's a lot of things I would like to have conversations about, but I feel intimidated about even bringing them up because I don't know if I'm going to bring it up the right way. And there's so much stuff about appropriation right now that's going on, and I think people feel like they don't know how to even look at somebody without it being potentially a problem, and this is not a good place for us to be in. We've got to find a way to say, okay, calm down.
Right.
It's not going to infect you to hear somebody else's idea. Mm-hmm. It's okay.
Or maybe it will.
Well, but I'm just saying, if you're convinced that you're coming from a position of truth, or if your ultimate goal is to understand truth has nothing to fear from honest, open dialogue and investigation, right? So if we can try to figure out how can we arrive at trying to collectively get at what maybe the truth is, and having that as a goal, we can explore the different ideas, maybe without as much animosity, maybe. I don't know. It's a tough one.
But maybe not everyone's goal is truth.
Well, that could be too.
You know, and especially as things have become divisive. Like, on a side note, I kind of feel like if I'm walking down the street and I'm with someone I really care about and someone attacks us or attacks them,
Yeah.
probably without asking my beloved person what's going on, I'm going to like, my just intrinsic nature is to like put myself in front of my friend and be like, whoa, hold up.
Yeah.
That's my first step before asking like, hey friend, did you do this or so and so. It's just an intuitive, instinctive reaction. And I feel like, especially on the political spectrum, as things have become a bit more tribal, sort of clan-ish, I don't know if I should use that word.
Tribal
but
is good.
Yeah. As people have like decided they are firmly in groups and they have hats and T-shirts and this is their team, I can see how that also gives a sense of belonging and identity. And then anything that's attacking this larger group might start feeling like the enemy. Because now I've identified with this group of people with our hats and our shirts and our badges and our uniform and our song and whatever else we might have adopted to identify one another, which now makes me feel a little less alone in the world, maybe.
Yeah.
Makes me feel a little bit more like I have a community. That can also interrupt the conversation.
Yeah.
Like out of almost a sense of love and protection and community, we may actually be stopping ourselves from having the very conversations that could produce a deeper sense of community.
Yeah. Well, I think tribe is a super important component of how we feel whole. Maybe what we have to work on is how do we enlarge the tribe so that it's not so many sub-tribes, but find a way to have a larger us tribe.
And yes, and what also would it be like if we could feel a little bit more secure in ourselves? That the need for the tribe may have, we might have a different relationship to the tribe, a different sense of need for it. And also if we could have a sense that other tribes aren't necessarily bad. You know, like we can play with the other team and then go and have beers afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and those would be some great things. So I know one of the ways that you've mentioned that you work to bring some of these things together is through music.
I would say it's one of the things I most love about making music is having a show. And especially as I mentioned before, I've actually been a bit surprised by some of the political diversity in my fan base because I just would have assumed that there was a easy knowing that I'm certainly on the left side of things, more on the liberal side of things. And that also makes me all the more thrilled that people who aren't of the same political ideology see beyond that and we're connecting because of the music. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
But I have, especially as politics have gotten so heated, I've really enjoyed seeing people who I know are on opposite ends of the spectrum, whether it's a political ideology, religious ideology, gender politics, whatever it might be, together at the show, high-fiving or like having a beer or crying together or dancing together. That is so exciting to me. And it's because all of us have come together to celebrate music and we're celebrating each other. And I think more than anything, we need these cathartic experiences with complete strangers where we are singing at the top of our lungs together or moving in the same way together somehow, whether it's cheering our favorite sports team, maybe it's in a religious house, maybe it's at a concert where everyone is singing the same song.
Yeah.
I find that so critically important, and I love seeing what bridges can be built when that happens.
Yeah.
Also between me and people I haven't met yet in the audience. audience members together. Also, maybe, people being in a new venue or in a new place or at a new part of town with a different group than they normally have spent time with. I think it's so exciting and interesting when diversity gets celebrated in whatever form.
Yeah.
I get a bit, I just think it's so critically important.
Yes.
Because we lose sight of ourselves also when we lose sight of each other. We lose something so critically important. It's like you lose your heart, because if you can't see how we're connected, then, isn't that so much of the point of all of it?
And that's where we ultimately have to recognize is we all are connected.
Yeah.
We can't not be. So we've got to figure out, we're in this together. How are we going to do this?
How are we going to do this? Step 1, everyone use your indicator while driving and slow traffic on the right. Use the left lane to pass. If we just did those 2 simple things, use your indicator and slow traffic stays on the right, fantastic. And that wasn't a metaphor for something political, by the way.
That's great.
As I put my foot in it.
Well, I imagine as somebody driving from LA that traffic is a constant theme in your life.
Well, I think it's yet another way we could all be a bit kinder to one another.
Yeah.
And create a safer world, by the way.
It's true.
Yeah.
So, would you like to do another song for us?
Sure.
Right on.
I'm gonna miss you. Today's your first day. I'm not gonna share my world with you, baby. I'm gonna miss you. Today is your first day. I'm not gonna share my world with you. The bed is empty. I can feel where your body lay in the sheets just this morning. I woke up kissing you. Tonight I'm missing you. Why did God take an angel home so soon? 'Cause baby, I'm gonna miss you. Today is the first day. I'm not gonna share my world with you, baby. I'm gonna miss you. Today is the first day. I'm not gonna share my world with you. All I can do is sing on. Robin singing will bring on solace for my weary head. So I will keep singing, singing and singing to comfort me while I'm in pain. 'Cause baby, I'm gonna miss
that was quite a different mood, but what a beautiful song.
Thank you.
And what is this one called?
It's called The First Day.
And tell me about this one.
At this moment, I now dedicate it to the empty seat at the table. You know, the place where there used to be a voice and now there's quiet. And, you know, as we were talking about the things that connect us, I think a profound moment is a moment of grief and loss. And my father died on Mother's Day, and one of the really interesting things to me about the entire process of his death and the experience around it was this really beautiful state of grace. Strangers and friends and neighbors and other family members really seemed to create this circle around my mom, my brothers, and I, and kind of hold the space for us. And the state of grace was, I think, one of the most profound gifts of experiencing his loss, as much as I know it might be odd to say that you can have a gift in someone's death, but it was such a beautiful thing. And I remember saying to my mom, I was like, you know, all of these people that have been so unbelievably kind and lovely in ways I couldn't have imagined. I said, I don't know who they voted for. You know, and isn't that so great?
Yeah.
We didn't need to know what anyone's politics were. It was just like, you know what? This is a very serious moment. This is something, you know, let's come together as human beings. And we know that grief and loss connects all of us. All of us have experienced that to some degree, or we will experience it to some degree. And I loved seeing the beauty that this passing presented. It reminded me how much more beautiful we could be to one another.
Yeah.
Especially strangers. You know, again, just kindnesses and considerations and, you know, food showing up at the front door and it was just a really, really, it was a gift.
Yeah.
As much as, you know, you can say that about someone you love dying. It was a real gift, actually.
Well, I know that a theme that comes up frequently on our show is about how death has a way of really clarifying a lot. And the more that we kind of try to distance ourselves from it or protect ourselves from it instead of acknowledging its reality, I think is part of our current cultural challenge is, you know, we need to get back to what's really important. And situations like that definitely remind us.
I think even having conversations about death
Yeah.
are really significant. Family just gathered around for Thanksgiving, and it was interesting as I was speaking with my brother's girlfriend, and you know, we were just talking about death, and she made the point of saying it's so nice to be able to have this conversation about death.
Yeah.
And I personally very much embrace conversations about death. I'm you know, sometimes words like this conversation we were having about political correctness, you know, strange, I'm intrigued and I'm fascinated and I'm curious about grief and loss and what remembering death can inspire
Yeah.
in how we live. I think it's so critical. And every now and then people have mentioned like, oh, you know, you write a lot of songs about death or dying. And I think, well, sometimes it's not even about death and dying. It's in considering those things we remember or are inspired to consider how to live.
Yeah.
The reason, like, you know, philosophers would have the skull on their desks wasn't to have some just morbid outlook. It was to be inspired to remember how fleeting this experience is. We don't know when we're going to take our ticket out.
Memento mori.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just think I like talking about the weird stuff. I like getting into it. I think that's
Yeah.
also where we can find the most interesting truths and perspectives about the people that we're conversing with.
Yeah. Well, and the more that we do keep our mortality in front of us,
Yeah.
that we are finite in this existence, that it does cause you, if you really do think about it, to, what am I doing with this? I'm only here for a bit, and nobody knows exactly how long, because you could get hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow. But it really brings a significance to life because of death. It's kind of strange to think about, that the real importance of life is because of death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you know you have 5 minutes somewhere, you're going to treat it differently than if you're like, I don't know, we might, I think we're going to be here all day. Or you assume you're going to be whether that's a physical space or a mental space. And anything that can serve to wake us up.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, it helps wake us up. So we're no longer, robotic or automatic. I think about how often I go through a day and I try and remind myself, whoa, what are you actually doing? Oh, I was doing laundry. Yeah, what are you doing? Can you be more conscious in this space? Can you be more awake right now?
Yeah.
Are you truly aware of what's going on around you? How present
Yep.
are you? And wouldn't life be more interesting the more present you are?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I've found to be true.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, this is a lot of the whole mindfulness craze is about that, developing that awareness of now.
Yeah.
And recognizing, when we're importing stuff from our past or fretting about the future, and how we can identify those things so that we are just more in the present and can experience it right now. And what a difference that makes. So much of our anxiety is about stuff that has happened or we think is going to happen, not what's actually going on. Yeah. One of the, just as a side note, kind of an interesting mindfulness experience that I've been working on that's been quite interesting is trying to observe without naming. Like if I go outside and I'm just looking at the trees or whatever, don't in my mind say, what a beautiful tree. Just experience the thing and the colors without having to name them, or the shapes. And it's a fascinating kind of a challenge, but it really focuses you into that present moment, which is kind of I've enjoyed it anyway.
Well, when you see the world in your mind, do you see it? How do you see it? Is it images? Is it words? Is it feelings? Is it some combination?
Definitely sometimes feelings will come into play. But with that particular exercise, I'm trying to do it without words. I'm trying to experience it without the categories. Because the categories are extremely important for being able to navigate life, but they can get in the way because the category is a useful container, but it's not the thing itself. And when we confuse the thing for the category, that's when we start to get messed up. So trying to keep in mind there's a whole world beyond the categories we put things in, and to just be able to experience it opens up things and ways of looking at things that are different.
And then if you take that and talk about like personal identification and this whole conversation that we're having, right? And like tribes and how one sees oneself, an extension of that would be like an I am statement. If I say I am these things, will that make it harder for me to be something other than that? Would it allow me to change? Like one of the things too with holidays and everything that we're in the middle of, spending time with family. And it's really interesting when you see different roles in a family, for example. And I think it can often be the hardest thing to change within the family structure because you have this long history from your birth up until the moment. And how do we allow ourselves to change? And the more we define what we are, we often are saying what we are not. And we might start living the identity that we've named instead of the reality of who we are. And all the more intense when we start talking about political ideology and this kind of tribalism that's happening in the public conversation. So if we say I'm this kind of a person, is there even any room for me to change into that kind of a person?
Well, interesting thought came to mind when you talk about that. Within different cultures, there has been a process where, where they have this rite of passage where they kind of move from child to adult or something in the middle. But in some contexts, there's a time where a person takes on a new name.
Right.
And, it's a fascinating thought, changing the name. I, not because of any particular ritual or whatever, did it. I just changed my name. Not
What was your
legally.
name?
Well,
Or do you even want to say? Is it like a private? I don't mean to.
It's not a private thing, but I just tend to think of it. That's what the IRS calls me.
Okay, and you've identified with a new set of letters.
So Jim is a complete and utter alias, not nickname of anything else. It's just completely new name that back in high school I adopted. And thinking about your concept about can we change and shift into being something different, in a certain sense I felt like that was something that happened for me, where that was kind of owning myself in a strange kind of way. I mean, there's a lot of other weird like side things connected with it because it's kind of strange changing your name, but it's something that stuck with me, and it's been a very interesting experience about going through that process.
Why Jim?
That actually happened from somebody else. So when I was in high school, I had long hair and wear the tie-dye shirts and moccasin boots and all that kind of stuff.
Were you a hippie, Jim?
I was a hippie. My parents used to say that I was an exchange student from the 70s.
Right on.
So that's kind of
groovy,
funny.
Man.
But so these guys were just joking around, pretending like I was Jim Morrison come back from the dead. And so they, for whatever reason, it just got in my head, what if I called myself Jim? Could I get everybody to call me Jim? And evidently, you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been, it's thinking about changing and within family, because that's also been kind of a thing within the family. I didn't change my name legally because I did not want to offend, my parents for them choosing the name they chose, or the fact that I was named after my grandfather, So it's not like I had a problem with the name.
Right.
This was just a way for me to kind of express more of maybe an independence or just kind of a self-identity.
Naming is very important.
Yeah, I never talked about this on here before, so you brought out something new.
Oh, well, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, so the death topic, super powerful, amazing song.
Thank you.
Just the thought of the first of everything after, right? It's like, we've gone through some tragedies within our family, and it's a thing. It's you don't know how to explain it exactly. You just experience it.
Picking up someone's shoes from the floor, and now you're like, well, now where do I put them?
Yeah.
The knit that wasn't finished on the table. Hopefully, you got to have all the conversations you wanted to have, or at least all the ones you knew you wanted to have up to that point.
Yeah.
I'm really lucky because I had a very amazing last week with my dad. My mom had asked me to come. My parents lived in strange, you have to use different words, right? My mom still lives in Kansas City. My parents lived in Kansas City. And I go to see them. I would go to see them every 4 to 6 weeks, just to be in the same space with them and know that everything's groovy. And I was due to come to Kansas City just a couple weeks later. My mom called and she said, I'd really like you to come to Kansas City. Okay. Well, I'll be there at the end of the month, but she said, no, I really would like you to be there. Okay. I said, well, I have a gig on Sunday. I'll be there on Monday. Got there on Monday, and because I didn't have work scheduled there, I just sort of spent this week with my parents, and We went and saw music, and we went to dinner, and we had some of the most extraordinary conversations I've ever had with my father, which included no matter what debates, we didn't always have an easy relationship, no matter what it has been. I'm not willing to rewrite the past, but I'd like you to know that all of it, I see, I understand, I love you. We are friends. I respect you. I love you. We are good. To actually have been able to say those things to my father, of course, not knowing that, I left Saturday night. He had the first of 2 heart attacks that would kill him by Sunday morning. What also an amazing gift. Like, have the conversations that you are scared to have. Do it now.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's going to happen. And you know what? If the conversation crashes and burns, all the more time you have at least now to fix it or figure it out or try a new angle. A terrible, terrible burden it is to have left things unsaid that you knew at the moment you wanted to say.
So when your mom called you to come out, was it because she knew your dad was in bad health?
No, there was no
So just unrelated.
cosmic.
Wow.
And I still, and my mom, I just saw her, was it yesterday? What day is today? So I'm keeping up that kind of, I love seeing her. And it was just, universe. Whatever prompted her to say, I think the end of the month is just a little bit too long. Can you just come out?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Holy moly. Thank you, universe. Thank you, universe. I don't know what that was about, but I got this really precious window of time, not knowing how precious it would be.
Yeah.
But is it again, memento mori, like, is the skull on the table?
Yeah.
Shizzle.
Wow. I am just so happy for you that you had that time.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. What a gift. What a gift.
Yeah.
Something's going
We
on.
don't
there.
always get that, so.
No, we
That's a
don't.
blessing.
But we do have a lot more time in front of us than we also think. We have the moment. We have right now.
Yeah. Yes.
Make the phone call. If there's someone you want to talk to, make the phone call now. But it ends up being so trite, isn't it? Like all of these great truths, we say them so often, and then you're just like, oh, that's what they meant by that. You know what I mean?
And then what do you do with it?
What do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, that's where that skull on the table or the coin in your pocket, that just is that little subtle reminder, that's like, oh yeah, I need to be focusing on what I should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactamundo.
All right. Well, let's shift out of this.
Okay.
Let's do another song.
All right.
When
Wow. So this was definitely a very upbeat song.
I like that you see it as upbeat.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
More rhythmic.
The energy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
More energy, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about this one then. What's it called?
It's called Never Too Far.
Okay.
And somewhat in the spirit of this conversation that we're having, you're never too far gone that you can't come home. Like, take that moment, whatever it is, find the bridge, make your way to whatever it is that is home, creates home, something you feel you've lost, find it again. Yeah.
So what do you think of when you think of home? Like, are you thinking of that like in a broader context, or like more of a specifically like where you go to sleep at night?
Me personally?
Yeah.
My husband is home. My mom is home. My family. And of course, there are exterior spaces. I think home, first and foremost, the people I love, the people I care about, and I can feel their love for me and their care for me, because I think it's important to have both sides of that equation.
Yeah.
I've done it where it's just one-sided, not nearly as much fun. I also think that there are places that just intuitively, I've landed somewhere. I was just recently in the south of France, and this particular city I was staying in while doing these concerts. Wow. I don't know if I would call it home, but I felt something there that I hadn't yet felt in a city. So I think it's a word with a lot of definitions, but first and foremost, wouldn't it be great if we were just at home with ourselves, no matter where we were, just knowing that we can be in a space that is complete and not needing anything, just within ourselves. That would be the target, number one.
Yeah.
But for sure, the people I love are home.
Nice.
Because then anywhere can be groovy. You can figure it out.
Yeah. So France, do you think it was the antiquity of it that brought that sensation?
Gosh, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm not 100% sure, but it was this medieval city. So just the stones have been there for a very long time. People have been walking these streets for centuries.
Yeah.
There's something interesting to me about that, knowing that they've already been here for centuries. They'll probably be here for centuries after I've walked my last walk through them. There was sort of a mystery to the city, because there's nothing, it's not surface, it's not plastic, it's not able to be thrown away. It's layer upon layer of history.
Yeah.
In different homes that I was in, some of them centuries old, I kept thinking, wow, what these walls have witnessed, what have been the conversations, what have been the scenarios. One church was burned down during the Albigensian Crusade. Another church was damaged during the war between the Protestants and the Catholics. New friends of ours were telling us how in their cellar, etched into the wall, and all of the cellars were connected as like escape routes throughout this city. In this particular part of the city was 1791 or 92, and a year of the French Revolution. Was that somebody fleeing, or thinking about this year in a particular way, like? And then, you can feel the energy of all that history. At least I feel like I can, and sort of the spirits and the ghosts, and, and then you look at a tree, and this tree has also been there for a certain amount of time, and who used to climb it, and who sat beneath it, and who is yet to sit beneath it. I was really drawn to it. And I loved the language, the journey that not speaking French and learning French and having conversations with people that it was, I don't know. I'm not being very articulate at this moment. I'm still processing it.
Yeah.
I was a bit overcome by the experience, especially the familiarity I had with a place that was completely unfamiliar.
Wow. Yeah.
Magic.
It's France.
And the cheese, the wine and the cheese. Holy, I mean, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, my wife's a big fan of all things French as well. One of these days I'll have to get there.
yeah.
There is when I think of France, of course, there's the Eiffel Tower and all that. Excuse me, I swallowed funny. But one landmark I'd like to see if I ever get a chance to go there, which is kind of maybe odd. There was an Audrey Hepburn movie, and I think maybe it was Funny Face, something like that. But there's this little tiny church that they go to that's like by this stream. It's just the most beautiful thing, and I just thought that'd be really fun to see that someday.
Put it on the bucket list, and then
Somewhere.
the skull is on the table.
Skull is on the table.
Buy the ticket. Just go.
That's the funny thing, and this is one of the things my wife probably likes least about me, is I am not a traveler. If it wasn't for family and other people getting me to go places, I'd probably have a hard time getting out of Fallbrook.
What is it about the travel that you don't like?
It's not that I necessarily don't like the travel. I just don't feel compelled to travel.
But now there's a small church by a stream waiting for you in France somewhere.
There you go. There's that. So someday, it's a funny thing for me. I haven't quite figured out why I'm not more of a travel person, but maybe I travel too deep wherever I am. I just keep pulling it apart.
Well, there are Tibetan mystics that say, well, I don't need to go to the moon. I've already been there.
Well, maybe I'll have to figure out how to do that.
Just saying.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do one more song before we go?
Love to.
All right.
Okay.
Shut teeth can hide in the softest mouth. I heard what you said, I know what you meant, but I'm playing the long game. You push me down, I'm gonna push away. You got what you need, so take it and leave, 'cause I'm not gonna back down. Now if I kept all of the stones that you've thrown, I would not know my own. I am not willing to be somebody's shadow. In my mind, I'm awesome. I'm freaking awesome, yeah. Oh, in my mind, I'm awesome. I'm freaking awesome, yeah. Say I'm proud that I live too loud. It isn't for you what I do, and I'm gonna keep dancing. I will double down on my daydreams. Come on down, raise out the roof, things no more hiding out and away. I am right here, right now. Oh yeah, oh. In my mind, I'm awesome. I'm freaking awesome, yeah. Oh, in my mind, I'm awesome. I'm freaking awesome, yeah. Hey, I might go down in flames, but I'll make it burn, so they see it from mine. I'm tired of fighting, tired of trying. I'm giving all of me up. In my mind, I'm awesome. I'm freaking awesome, yeah. I am freaking awesome, yeah. Freaking awesome, freaking awesome, freaking awesome, freaking awesome, and awesome, freaking awesome, freaking awesome, freaking you are freaking awesome too.
Okay, I guess you're. Wait a minute. Didn't you say we get boxed in by calling ourselves things?
Yeah, but that's an okay thing, right? Isn't it like, freaking awesome feels good?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd actually written it because I had been rather bullied and betrayed by somebody that was really important to me. Oh, and it really hurt. And you know, it's interesting. I think when the people we love kind of figure out a way to stick a knife underneath the ribs, where we put that kind of hurt is an interesting place. And I found that feeling the hurt or feeling sad originally was very difficult. And so I got angry. And I sort of sat down at the piano and I wrote something that was not freaking awesome. Well, maybe it was freaking awesome, but it was certainly expressing a different range of emotions. And I just thought, you know, I'd really like to move out of this space. And I also don't want to identify with the way that this made me feel, and also with what this person implied who I was, which I felt was incorrect. And it's like, let me see if I can write something that will at least make me feel better for the time being. And it's maybe not a beep song. Am I allowed to say the naughty word? The beep you song. But instead could be like, you know what? No matter what's going on with that, I'm going to feel better about myself. And hopefully people feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
I think the world would be a much better place if we felt better about ourselves. I think if we felt better about ourselves, we would probably have more capacity for difference and diversity and dissent, and the world would be a happier place.
Yeah.
I have the sneaking suspicion that the wounds and sort of broken and damaged bits that we carry within ourselves, if we don't figure out ways to heal, I think that's often where some of the most grotesque behaviors come from.
Yeah.
So I think if we could all love ourselves more.
Yeah.
And I'm the first that needs to work on it. I'm certainly not saying I've got it all figured out by any means. But man, if we could all figure out ways to love ourselves more, I think it would be so much easier to love each other.
Yeah. And building on the strengths, working from that place of strength instead of our weakness, gives us so many more opportunities.
I have to think about building, yeah. But I would say that damage is a bit different than a weakness, because I also think that a weakness can also be an incredible place to build from as well if we have a sense of perspective around it. Like, and I know weakness and vulnerabilities aren't necessarily the same things, but I think embracing that side can be really generative.
Oh, sure. We need to be fully cognizant of what's going on. But I think when we're coming from a place of beat down, we look at things differently.
Yeah.
And if we find the areas where we're strong, where we can see where we've succeeded in the past, and we use that as a way to inspire us for how we're going to tackle the current whatever, it gives us more of an energy to tackle it, as opposed to feeling like I'm defeated, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about that with like the political stuff a lot too, to bring it back to that. Because the easiest way people get people rallied up is fear. You know, the sky is falling, gather around, we got to tackle this thing. But then people are just like, you know, what are we going to do? Instead, if we look at how much we have done and how far we have come and all the progress that's been made, instead of focusing on all these real challenges, but that's not the whole story. The whole story is in just about every category you can think of, we have been doing extremely better. It's just our small frame of reference. We see the ups and downs, and it feels like things are falling apart, but we really have so much to build on and go with.
Well, it's like if at a political rally, for example, what is the chant? Right? Is it something that's promoting more community in a broader sense?
Yeah.
Is it like, a Go USA, for example, would be a chant that hopefully would be sort of like, hey, let's bring everybody together, like Go Team. What are the motives, what are the energies that are being tapped into to gain community? And like you said, if those energies are about fear and paranoia and something's being taken from you, you better put up walls and so forth. I think we should be aware of just the energies that are being tapped into, just the emotions.
Oh, yeah.
Or is it tapping into, there's a beauty here. There's something gorgeous here. There's something we can build on. As you said, like, what are the positive attributes of this dynamic?
Yeah.
We're building from different places.
Then you're building something freaking awesome.
Freaking awesome! Yeah.
Well, Julia, I have really enjoyed our time together tonight. Thank you so much for coming out.
My pleasure. You were worth braving the traffic for.
Well, hopefully we'll have you out again sometime.
That would be lovely.
All righty. Be well, everyone.